I'm just starting live stream. I'll let you know once we're on.
Okay.
All right then, we're ready. Yeah, we're on now.
Good evening and welcome to Audit and Standards Committee of Sheffield City Council. I'm now going to hand over to Abby, who will do the housekeeping announcements for us.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for logging on to this Zoom video conference of the Audit and Standards Committee. I'm the Democratic Services Officer for this meeting, and I'm assisted by my colleague Jay Bell, who's the host of the virtual meeting. We'll proceed to introductions and housekeeping in a moment, but just a couple of points to note. This meeting is a public meeting and in alignment with the new regulations which permit meetings to be held by remote means and will be live streamed for the public to view. To make the meeting run as smoothly as possible, can I please ask that participants in the virtual room leave your microphone on mute when you are not speaking. When you want to speak, please raise your hand to the camera or use the virtual hand raise. Only unmute when the chair indicates that you can speak. If at any time a member loses the ability to hear or be heard, they must alert the chair or host as soon as possible. You may see members looking away from their screens at times. This is because they will need to look at an additional screen or device containing the agenda. As members and officers are mainly working from their own homes, you may hear distant sounds of children, pets, or household noises from other rooms. I'll now hand you back to the chair. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Abby. So if we do some introductions, although our names I think should be here. I'm Sumid Meyer Richards. I'm the chair of this committee and I'm a councillor for Manor and Castle Ward. Councillor Maroof, you're muted.
I've just had a conversation with myself. Councillor Mohammed Maroof, councillor for Crooks and Crosspool and Shadow Cabinet Member for Education.
Thank you. Councillor Ernst.
Yeah, I'm Councillor Adam Hurst, Councillor for West Ecclesfield, also Cabinet Advisor for Children and Education. Sorry, for Education and Employment. Thank you.
Councillor Argencio.
Yes, Councillor Angela Argencio, Councillor for Bromhill and Shallow Vale.
Simon. Sorry, Councillor Clement Jones. Let's do it properly. Sorry.
Councillor Jones will do either. Councillor Simon Clement Jones, Councillor for Beecham and Greenhill and Shadow Cabinet Member for Finance.
Thank you. And Alison, or sorry, Independent Member Alison.
Yes, Independent Member for the Audit and Standards Committee.
And then the officers who we have here, Linda.
Hiya, Linda Hunter, Senior Finance Manager, Internal Audit, Risk Management and External Funding for Sheffield City Council.
Thank you. Dave.
Hi everyone, I'm Dave Phillips, Head of Strategic Finance at Sheffield City Council.
David.
I'm David Waxman. I'm an independent person who works with the Monitoring Officer on ethical standards.
Thank you. Where am I? Abby, you've already been. Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Ryan Keyworth. I'm the Council's Director of Finance and Commercial Services.
Thank you. Gillian.
Hello, I'm Gillian Duckworth. I'm Director of Legal and Governance and the Council's Monitoring Officer.
Thank you. Hayley.
Clark, Ernst & Young, member of the External Audit team.
Thank you. And you can't see Jay, but he's the person holding us all together. Thank you. Thank you all for coming here this evening. We were saying earlier that it's a gloomy time of year and it's a hard time to be going into almost lockdown once again. So let's just be kind to each other tonight and just try and have a good meeting where we just want to do the business. So if that sounds all right with you, that's number one done. Number two, apologies for absence. Do we have any?
I've just had an apology from John McElraith, Executive Director of People.
Okay, thank you. Item 3, exclusion of the press and public. there are no items which require this, I believe.
No, that's right, Chair.
Good. Any declarations of interest, item 4? No? Okay. So item 5, minutes of the previous meeting. You're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 30th of July. Shall we start just by factual accuracy? If we go page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13. Oh, sorry, did somebody shout? No? Oh, and page 14. Okay, and then do we have any matters arising? Page 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Okay, so we can resolve that they are accurate minutes and that there were no matters arising. Thank you. So hang on, let me find my place. The next item is item 6, which is final accounts audit process. And we're just going to have a verbal report from Hayley explaining what is going to happen over the accounts. Over to you. Unmute.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to say, my colleague Steve Clark is attempting to join, but I will obviously just progress, and if he joins, then great. What we thought we would do actually is, because a lot's actually happened since we issued our audit plan back in, I think we actually issued it in the March before obviously we obviously entered into the global pandemic. So what I was just going to do was briefly talk you through sort of the risk assessment process we'd gone through, just to give you some of the assurances of what we are doing over the accounts for this year end. And then if it's okay, I was then going to just briefly give you an update as to where we are on the audit and sort of timetable through to completion. And if it would be helpful, because I'm conscious you don't have anything in front of you, if it would be helpful, I'm happy to circulate a brief summary of what I'm about to say to you after the meeting.
That would be very helpful, thank you.
So in terms of our original audit plan, we had, as we do with every audit plan, we had an assessment of our risks of fraud and error. And within that, we'd highlighted one specific fraud risk around inappropriate capitalisation of expenditure. What we've actually done is we have reflected on any impact on the potential control environment and whether that would leave the council susceptible to any additional fraud risks. Having had conversations with the finance team and more broadly thought about where those risks might arise, we're actually relatively comfortable that we do not need to amend our risk assessment in that particular area of fraud. So those risks still remain in place, and the scope of our work in those areas will remain as we set out in our audit plan. In terms of property, plant and equipment valuations, you may recall that was highlighted as a significant risk, and that's been there for the past 2 years, and that's mainly because of the sheer size of the property portfolio you have, and the inherent risk associated with the valuation of those properties. Now, given the proximity of the global pandemic and particularly the impact in the UK to the balance sheet date, clearly the assets most susceptible to variations in valuation will be those associated with market value or fair value. Now, because our risk was already at the highest level in terms of significant risk, we haven't felt the need to amend that. But just to reassure you, we have reflected on the scope of our procedures and what we're doing, and we have engaged real estate specialists who have a particular focus on those assets that are either categorised as fair value or market value. And obviously we'll be having more considerations around the approach the council's valuers have taken to valuing the portfolio this year. Going concern, we had included as an area or as what we'd class as an other matter in our audit plan, and that was mainly to highlight some changes in auditing standards. Now, obviously, there is a underlying presumption that the council will continue as a going concern. I think we would all agree, though, that COVID-19 and the impact of assurances around future funding puts a slightly different spin on that. And as you will appreciate, as an audit firm, there are certain things that we need to go through in order to make sure that we're comfortable signing off on the accounts as a going concern. We've been talking quite closely, and particularly with Dave, about what that would mean. And essentially, it'll be having a look at your medium-term financial strategy, your underlying cash flow projections over at least from a 12-month period from the date that we sign, and just making sure we're comfortable with those, and actually do the disclosures in the financial statements. Do they reflect the risks? And also then what's the impact on our audit opinion as a result of that? And some of the considerations we make around that is whether we need to include an emphasis of matter to draw attention to a particular note in the account which highlights something, or a material uncertainty. And in order to do that, we need to work through a consultation process. So that will be going on in the background in the lead up to signing the accounts.
Okay.
I suppose a couple of the other areas where we're seeing potential impacts of COVID-19, so obviously impairment of receivables or recoverability of your debtors at the end of the year. So whilst we don't consider that to be necessarily a heightened risk in its own right, we will obviously look at the judgments and the estimates that management are making around that, and just make sure we're comfortable with that, and that's adequately disclosed in the financial statements, and there's no risk of material error there. Pensions, so obviously same I suppose with the asset side of things. Obviously you've got your pension assets within the fund, and the volatility that they might experience around that 31st of March deadline. Now, we haven't felt the need to increase the risk assessment in that area because we've been speaking to Deloitte over the summer as the auditors of that pension fund, and we're relatively comfortable with the work they're doing over that. And obviously, because there's been a significant amount of time elapsed since then, actually enables auditors to gain greater assurances over how particular assets within those portfolios may have been revalued. One thing to note that we are looking at in the background is, you may be aware of obviously the consultation that's been out in relation to McLeod. It was an issue that was there last year around pension liabilities and how they are estimated. We just need to make sure that that doesn't lead to any form of material misstatement in the accounts, and we're looking at that, and we'll be willing to report back to you on that in November. Many of you may have noticed in the original audit plan we had a risk around IFRS 16, or the implementation of a new leases standard basically from next year. That's actually been pushed out a year. So thankfully, out of all of this, that's a risk that has actually fallen away for this year, which I think everyone was slightly relieved about. The only other thing I really wanted to mention in terms of risk assessment is obviously just making sure that in your annual governance statement and your narrative report, that obviously you are talking about COVID and the impact it's had on the organisation and what that means in terms of your risks and how you've dealt with that, and also considerations around the control environment. So we'll be looking at all of that as well. And then clearly value for money and the risks associated with that, again, links slightly in with the going concern piece as well in terms of medium-term financial strategy, and obviously we'll be happy to report back to you on that in November. So I'm just going to pause there because I'm conscious that's quite a lot of information before I lead on to the progress update. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I was going to say, anybody want to come in? Simon?
I mean, I think all it really does is it poses questions for Ryan and Dave, really. So I guess they're the ones that need to answer the questions, I suppose.
Right. No, it was if anybody has any questions at this stage. You usually do if there's any mention of fraud, Simon.
Well, no, I mean, really, I mean, for me, it's, as I say, it's is, you know, are Dave and Ryan comfortable with thinking that, you know, we are going to be able to have that 12-month assurance?
Right, David. Sorry, Dave.
Sorry, do you want me to? Yeah, I'll respond to that. I mean, the first thing to say is that you know, Hayley and the auditors have talked through these issues with us before, so Hayley is not telling us anything that's a surprise or that we disagree with. She's absolutely right that they're doing considerable amount of work in all these areas, and in particular, to pick up the one you talked about, looking at our financial position even more closely than they would do anyway. So we've excuse me, submitted things like our cash flow forecast for this year and next, and our reserve position. And for those of you that want to do some more background reading, the medium-term financial analysis has been published now and will go to Cabinet next week. So Hayley will be scrutinising that closely. I mean, the message we've been giving is that for the next 12 months, we are not about to go over the edge of the cliff. It's a conversation we had with both sets of councillors, but all sets of councillors that talk to us. But the medium term, we need to work very hard and lobby government very closely, because we do have significant financial gaps going forward. Government won't announce its funding for next year until December. So we won't know how much they will help us close those gaps until then. Without some significant help, like all of local government, COVID means that we've got additional costs and reduced income. So we have financial gaps. We have sufficient reserves, as I said, for the next 12 months and a bit longer than that. So from an audit perspective, we're a going concern for the next year. For any members of the public that are listening in, local authorities aren't like private firms. We will never cease trading and stop providing services. We will always continue to provide services, but we obviously get in very significant trouble from government, and indeed they can take us over if we can't balance the books at the end of the day. So I'm hoping that we'll convince the auditors that we are okay on these things. I mean, Hayley will come on to the audit process, but what there is this year is a heightened scrutiny on that for every single body that they audit, and a very significant in the background national QA process as well that she'll have to take us through, and she'll warn us whether that it threatens the end of November deadline for finishing the accounts or not. I'll pause at that point.
Thank you. Ryan, did you want, hang on a minute, Simon. Ryan, did you want to add anything to that?
No, thanks, Chair. I think Dave's covered it really well. Thank you.
Thank you. So Simon, and I've got Councillor Maroof next.
Sorry, yeah, nothing further, really.
Oh, right. Sorry, Councillor Maroof.
A couple of questions, really. It may be the wrong place to ask the questions, but I'll ask them anyway. And do stop me if I'm asking the wrong question here. But in terms of the property valuations, Hayley touched upon the property valuations and having specialists to have a look over these. Are there any special concerns that we have around the property valuations? And are we exposed in terms of loans against properties that we may become a problem in the future? And the second question, I'll ask the second one at the same time as well. I'm assuming that a lot of our social housing is also being valued, and in particular the high-rise flats, which have got cladding on them. And from within the industry, it's very, very difficult to actually get a valuation on flats with cladding, and almost to the extent that some of the flats with cladding on them at the present time are being valued at nil value. And therefore, that could be quite a substantial hit in terms of the basis of valuation for flats in particular. Those were the two questions, Councillor Richards, that I needed to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who wants to pick those up? Those are meaty questions. Hang on, Angela, you're not answering. Dave, do you want to answer?
Okay, Hayley might want to come in a minute. I mean,
yeah.
You're absolutely right, Councillor, to flag up the impact of COVID on potential income streams from our investments in things like Heart of the City and West Bar. We have provided the auditors with the latest projections on Heart of the City in particular, and to a lesser extent on West Bar, because it's somewhat smaller. West Bar is still in a situation whereby we're not entirely signed on the dotted line for all of it, I believe. Heart of the City is in phases, so we can slow down and pause the phases if they are not working through. But the auditors will need to satisfy themselves, excuse me, that our valuations of those assets are correct, and they quite often get their own experts in to look at the results of our experts. Much of the same happens on pensions. We have an actuary that provides our figures, and they have an actuary that argues with our actuary, and we just step back and let them fight it out in the corner. So we'll do that on the valuations as well. Similarly on flats, I mean, we have a professional valuation team who value flats and take account of things like cladding. Our social housing already has a discount factor applied to it to reflect the valuation for social housing. So in these areas, we, and to an extent, Hayley, both of them professional accountants, rely on the valuers and their views to get the values right. I'll stop at that point.
Thank you, Hayley.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add other than what Dave said, really. I mean, yes, we will be looking at the regeneration schemes and not only how decisions around those have been made, obviously during the 1920 financial year, but then also then flipping that and saying, you know, how is that impacting the income streams, and what are you planning to rely on, if at all, as part of your as part of the assessment around going concern in your medium-term financial strategy. I think in terms of, I think your question around, is there any, you know, particular concerns around the valuations? What I suppose what I would say is we've not come across anything yet. Our audit work is obviously still underway, and as Dave said, we engage specialists just to make sure that we are bringing the right expertise into the team and considering the right factors when determining whether the assets are materially valued in the financial statements. One of the reasons we've extended the scope of our procedures around that is you do have a large variety of different asset types that are valued differently depending on what type of asset they are within your balance sheet, and it's just making sure that we're focused and fixated on the right ones and considering the right things that we need to consider as part of that. Those held at fair value being those that we're most interested in.
Thank you. Angela.
Question is regarding debtors and what impact debtors are having on our sort of kind of finances, and if we have any data on how it's going in the collection, you know, of debt that you know, was deferred because of COVID, and is there any provision in terms of you know, people who are really struggling to write it off, and what impact that would have? So is there like long-term like planning, medium-term planning in that way, in terms of debt that will never be recovered?
I don't know who would answer that. Is that you, Dave, again? Okay.
Yeah, I'll have a go at that. Yes, you're right that the COVID crisis will have an impact on the amount of debt the council holds. There are two slightly different aspects to the question. There's an accounting aspect, which is around us getting our profile of debt, and we have a process of the older the debt is, the more we allow for non-payment in our accounts. So that will be an accounting process, and Hayley and her team will check that we've done that correctly. But there's an operational aspect to it as well that in many ways is of more concern to members, where people will get in more debt because their income has fallen. And as a council, we always say we try and very strongly distinguish between the can't pay and won't pay people. If people can't pay, we want to absolutely support them, and there are a series of things we can do, and there's a series of government schemes to try and support them. If they simply can pay but don't want to and think they can get away with it, then we need to pursue them, and we will pursue them to get that money back, because it's not fair on the inhabitants of Sheffield if people don't pay when they can do. So that will be something that obviously has a bit of an effect. Last year has a massive effect this year, because this year the position will be very difficult for a number of people, and so I'm sure will be a huge focus on the audit when they're looking at next year's figures. The crisis itself really only hit towards the end of March, so most of last year's income streams were in place, so they shouldn't have such a big impact there, but will have a huge impact in 2021.
Okay, thank you. And I was going to say that in our January meeting we're having an update on universal credit, so I think that will be a timely report then. Hayley, sorry, were you going to continue to the next bit now? Okay.
I was, yeah. So just in terms of general audit progress, obviously all of the deadlines were moved out. So the normal July deadline was obviously moved to the end of November, and that's currently what we are working to. In collaboration with Ryan, Dave and the team in the summer, we decided that we would phase the audit slightly differently. So we came in and did some work in July, had a break over the summer, obviously, as everyone had some much needed rest and a break, and then we've come back and restarted the audit from mid-September. So are currently in the throes of undertaking that. So everything's very much in progress at the moment. So we've still got a fair amount to do, and there's a lot to, I'd say, collectively work on in order to make sure that we can continue to work to that end of November deadline. There are some areas that inevitably take a little bit longer and put some additional pressure on both sides. So PPE valuations, the size of it is obviously an area that we're very keen to close down very quickly. And there's always some additional complications when it comes to auditing some of the schools' balances, just because obviously they are slightly more devolved and the council has slightly less control over some of the information flows there. But been working quite closely with Dave to try and see how we can escalate that. And what I would say is we've probably in that area made better progress than what we have done in previous years. So that's all been really, really promising, and a lot of early work that has gone in at the very start of the year to enable us to do that. As I say, we've got a lot to do. Obviously, there's a lot of additional work that we need to do around the going concern piece as well. We've got an internal consultation process we need to go through before we can issue the opinion. So we're absolutely working towards the deadline of the 27th of November and being able to sign. I think it would be amiss of me, though, to sit here and say we will absolutely 100% meet that. There's a lot of things that can happen between now and then. But obviously, we will continue to work very closely. And if there is anything that you need to be aware of, we would obviously come back and alert you to that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, last year I was talking to somebody about a parking scheme in my ward, and they said, is that exactly when it's going to happen? I said, well, you know, events, and I had no idea that pandemic should have been something I would have said at the time. Okay, thank you very much, Hayley. And I think that's your colleague trying to come in as iPhone, so thank you to him for listening in.
Yeah, hi, sorry, apologies, Chair. I was struggling with a link, but I'm on it now.
Right, and we're about to move on to the next item, but thank you for being there. So item 7 is internal audit tracker report on progress with recommendation implementation. And I'm just going to say at the beginning that it's a disappointing report. That's I think that's polite local government speak, because I'm quite astonished at the number of recommendations which still haven't been completed, particularly when I believe we have some business coming from 2016, which is 4 years of waiting for something to be implemented. So I'm not quite sure who's speaking on this. Is it you, Linda?
Yeah.
So, okay, recorded disappointment, and talk to us about it.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, like you just said, this is a rolling report that's presented every 6 months to this committee. So it's to update you on the progress against the recommendations. And yeah, there are some new reports added. We've got 3 new reports added. Information security, incidents, direct payments, and automatic number plate recognition. It's a bit of a mouthful there, but ANPR as well, that's abbreviated to. There's 3 new reports added, which are recent audits. Like you say, you're quite right. There are still some reports going back to 2016 that were issued that were still tracking some recommendations. We have got, this report does show there's 52 recommendations due for implementation at the moment. but this update has actually given us 25 of those have been implemented. So those have been fully implemented. And then there's 27, which is 52%, are still ongoing. And I think that's what the chair's just mentioned. That's the disappointing thing that you've mentioned, is that there's still some ongoing. Quite a lot of those are still, the work has started, but it hasn't been fully completed yet. So, as I say, quite a few, they're still ongoing. There are still 4 critical recommendations in the report. So there's still 4 criticals, and 2 of those is to do with the OMS. This is the Housing Management System, Application System. And 1 is the recent report we just added about information security. And then the final one is about software licensing report. So the oldest one of those 2, like the chair just mentioned, is the OMS one that has been on there for a couple of years now. The report has gone to GMT, that went in October. They have noted that things are ongoing on some recommendations and that where the progress is on these. So it has gone to EMT. But like I say, what we need this report is for the committee members to note what's, where the current position is with these recommendations. But then also, I'd like to recommend there's 2 reports that actually have been actioned now. So that is the subject access request report that's been fully actioned, that can be taken off, and then the early payment to providers, care providers as well, actioned and implemented now. So that's what I'm asking for this committee, is to know the content, but also to prove that we can remove those 2 from this tracker. So if there's any more questions on this report, and what I can do, Chair, is, like I say, you've highlighted about the progress to the implementation of some of these recommendations goes back a few years. What I can do is take this back to EMT and highlight about your concerns that things are still outstanding, and see if we can sort of find out why these are still outstanding. Is it the resources? Is it resources or budget or the staffing side? Just to get a bit more background to these recommendations and why they've stalled a little bit. If that helps the next report that we provide back in January, because that's on the work programme for January 21. Thank you.
Yeah. Angela, I think you wanted to come in.
Well, thank you, Linda. You've partly kind of answered my question. Yeah, my question was, my comment was to echo what the chair has said about the disappointment about some of these items, especially in the IT kind of area. We seem to have to drag a bit. Things have been there for a very long time, and I was going to ask him what is being done about it. How are we going to, do we need to look at resources and what we can do in that way and deploy, So thank you for referring it to EMT. I think that is what I was going to ask, actually, whether that was possible.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think I was just going to say no. I think we can think of some wording while we're all questions and things. We can think of some wording for how we would like to express this to EMT. If members have any ideas, I have a few. Simon, were you going to?
I mean, it's more of a process thing. I don't know, because I kind of saw the ANPR report, and obviously, it's not in here. It's not public. And I'm just wondering, kind of, what the process is, because kind of I've seen it obviously, but I don't know quite why it hasn't made it into this report this time. If that's a matter of timing or I don't know.
Yeah, it's the timing. So the automatic number plate recognition report, what it is, it goes onto this report once the last date of the implementation for recommendation. So it's too early. They haven't actually got to the implementation deadline yet. So it'll appear on the report once the deadlines have gone. Does that make sense to?
Once they've failed, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, once they've missed the deadline date for the recommendation, yeah, then it goes on here.
Is there some sort of early warning system whereby you can say to them they're getting rather concerned at the moment and we don't want to see it added to our list? It's a bit like, traffic lights, they're ambering, aren't they, heading towards red, and we'd rather they were heading back to green. is there anything that can be done rather than, you know, just saying, woo, we've noted that, or Simon spotted it?
Yeah, what I can do is, because each portfolio do track their own, like the performance side as well, they do track their own recommendations as well. So they have leads within each portfolio as well. So what I can do is talk to the leads, because I know particularly in I work closely with the place portfolio previously, so I know they do have an individual that every quarter will send out reports to the heads of service and ask them for an update on the position for their recommendations. So they discuss them with the heads of service one-to-ones as well. So what I can do is raise it with the leads as well for each portfolio to push it along from that route as well. So I like to say, rather than doing it after the implementation, if I do it more proactive and be sort of mention it, like I say, more as a red before it gets to the red.
Yeah. Is that helpful, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, it's just that, you know, that report had recommendations. Obviously, you know, it just kind of disappears into a black hole until the implementation date is a problem. And obviously, without it being public, you know, it's difficult to drill into it. And then in 6 months' time, you know, I don't know where we're going to be. So, you know, as I say, it just seems to me that I say the process is lagging somewhat in terms of providing what it needs to do, which is inform us and the public about you know, what is going on. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Let's think of some words there. Maruf, were you going to come in? Yeah.
Yeah. In particular, I'm concerned about page 46, and that's a recommendation from internal audit for training of council staff. And if you look at 8.1 and 8.2, the original implementation date, I know Chair's touched upon this already.
Come back to the, what page number again? Sorry, Maruf.
Page 46. Page 46.
Okay.
The original implementation date was December 2016. The revised one is January 21, which I think is more than likely to be breached with what we're going through at the moment anyway. Yeah. But what is actually concerning is that this was training for staff to identify potential fraud and get consistency across the council. And this is 5 years out of date now. And what worries me as would worry members of the public is that we haven't actually rolled out this training, and there could be certain things going on within the authority that have no consistency to them whatsoever. So this is quite alarming, really, to be fair.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I was expressing grave disappointment at the beginning.
Yeah, I know you did, Chair, but this in particular is even more worrying, because there could be fraud going on which is completely undetected because people are not trained to spot it.
Ryan or Dave, will you? Is that an operational problem rather than something that Linda has to try and explain again?
It's not so much an explanation, Chair. It's more of this sort of training should become, I know it's regarded as being mandatory, but it's not happened for 5 years. So if there's not been an ongoing program going on, then clearly there are going to be people within the organisation who are not trained or are not trained with the up-to-date methods of detecting fraud.
Gillian.
Thank you, Chair. My understanding of this, and my finance colleagues may be able to add to it, is that this is about the online fraud training. So it's not that there's no training, it's that it's the online module that they were trying to get, they kept having problems with. So I'm almost 100% sure that we've continued with fraud training. It's just not the online version that's available. Like I say, my finance colleagues might be able to add more to that.
Linda?
Yeah, confirm that. It is. This just relates to the e-fraud learning. So, and that's where it's got a January 21 date. It's been produced now. It's in a draft format. What's the stage now is to actually convert it into the learning and development format, so it can actually go on the e-learning hub. So it's on its final stages. So, but like I say, it's the priority now, because it like I say, it goes back to 2016. So it does need boosting now. So yeah, it will be.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that response. As I said, my concern is e-fraud is more prevalent than any other fraud these days anyway. So it's much more important to have measures in place to counteract that. So that is my sort of thought process on that one.
Okay, can I ask, hang on, I'm going to ask just about the long-term absence of the finance officer. What has been done to replace or have somebody short-term to fill that gap?
They've actually returned now, so they're back now, and this is what the priority is. So the person that was absent that started this is now back, and that is their priority workload to get this done now. So
okay,
yeah, due to an operation, and now they're back.
Okay, Angela.
Yes, sorry, just going back to training, because training uptake is a real issue in the council. So it's not just the availability of the training, it's how we ensure that staff actually do the training, because we have very, very low percentages of staff that do the mandatory training. So that is something that has been, mentioned in this committee quite a lot. It's been mentioned more than once. I would say 3 times since I've been elected, which is just over a year. So there is also an underlying issue here, not just about having the resources, but having people actually doing it and making, we have members not doing training and we have staff not doing training, and we have to find a way as an organization to have everybody doing training, because we're all working in the same organization and we need to be competent. So we need to also address that, because that is, I think, even more important than actually the training itself, but it's having the culture. The training is, part of your job.
I think that's coming up actually in the next item, Angela. So we'll clock it then, and that'll give Gillian a bit of time to think about that one, because it'll be in her report. Does anybody else want to ask anything about this report? I think we would like, this committee would like to express deep concern to EMT at the lack of progress on some items, particularly the ones which are, what do we call them, the critical recommendations. And we'd like to know what the issues are around these. When we talk of resources, is it staffing, or is it lack of finance? But we would like a report, because we don't think that this is good enough for members, and indeed for the people of Sheffield, to know that decisions take so long to be implemented. Does that sound like what we've been trying to say, everybody?
Can we add the word disappointment as well as concern, please?
Concerned and disappointed, yeah. That's what my mother would say. Gillian.
Just to confirm, Chair, I'm happy to take that back into EMT for you. I would imagine that the answer is it's a range of issues, but we can make sure that the committee gets a bit more detail on that.
Okay, so that's, when's our next meeting? Is it November, Abby, or January?
The next meeting is the 26th of November.
Right, so Jill, we'd like a report back from EMT for that meeting.
That's fine. Thank
you. Are there any other questions or comments from anybody? No? Okay, so we'll move on to item 8, which is the Code of Corporate Governance. And we've been given an update of the Code of Corporate Governance, which Gillian, you will talk to us about, please.
I will, yes. So the Code of Corporate Governance is we're provided with a framework by SIPFA as to what our governance framework should look like, and this Code of Corporate Governance that we've adopted follows that framework and sets out what evidence we can produce to say how we comply with this code. So this is an update. The code was last updated in 2018. This is the most recent update, and that then is used when we're preparing our governance statement, our annual governance statement, to monitor the effectiveness of the governance arrangements. So we measure against that code. So this is the updated code so basically it's the policies or procedures that that have changed since 2018 is the update.
Thank you. Angela, did you want to comment on this?
Yes, just briefly, just a quick question, Gillian, if you don't mind. In terms of the evidence, there's a list of evidence of where we would fit in with that. Would it be possible to have like dates of when all of those were last looked at? Because obviously, you know, we've just looked at the Member and Officer Code of Conduct, but how old are all these policies and documents that are used as evidence quite recent, or are there some of them that maybe we will have to look at and update? That would be you know, good to know if there is any work to be done on any of those.
Yeah, can do. And one of the things that I want to do when we get a bit of a breather from the pandemic is actually look at doing almost an audit of this and having a look at the documents and having a look at whether this actually is sufficient to cover the requirements of the framework. So that's a piece of work that that I have got in sort of in my work plan for the next year. So that within that, what I can do is I will be reviewing the documents and I'll be able to provide you with that information. I can't guarantee I can do that by the next meeting, but I will try.
No, that's...
yeah.
No, I wasn't. I know how you know, it wouldn't be fair to ask for something like that. You know, at short notice. But and also, will this be? Point. Will it be public? So can the public keep, you know, the council into account and say, actually, can you demonstrate the appropriateness of your actions in this case, considering the code of conduct? So will it be very relevant in public spaces, including the website, so that it's easy to find? And so that, you know, it's like a double kind guarantee that we keep it in mind all the time, but also that the public can say, look, you're not doing what you're saying you're supposed to do. Because I think, you know, in terms of openness and transparency, it's very important that we ensure that anybody can actually spot when we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, so this is on the website at the moment. It'll be the 2018 version that's on the website. It's on the pages on, is it how the council works? It's where the constitution is, and the leaders scheme. You've got your code of corporate governance on there as well. So yes, it is a publicly available document.
Thank you. Simon.
Yeah, I'm just trying to work out how much this is unique to Sheffield and how much the changes are done from the original SIPFA document. In terms of, I'm guessing that the SIPFA document has the summary and the sub principles and the behaviours and actions, and that's pretty much, we've taken that, and then it's the evidence that is purely what we put in. And so I mean, I think just kind of off the top of my head, I mean, I think you can kind of see each of those bullet points that we put in. There's pretty much a web page on the website you could click on to have that to kind of, you know, evidence it even further if you like, to show, you know, this is where it is. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, for me it is quite a useful list to say, yeah, this is what it is, what's missing. Thanks.
So maybe we might circulate this revised list to members anyway, and say, either send them the link to look at it, or actually send it to them and say, by the way, this is what you've signed up to. Angela?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Gillian.
No, I was just going to say, if that's what, yeah, if you want me to do that, I can do that. Yeah.
I think the committee would like that. Yes. Simon, can we go back to the putting our thumbs up that you instigated last time? I find it easier. Thank you. Was that not putting a thumb up, Adam? Oh, that's okay then. Right, yes, please then, Gillian. Angela.
It's not just the members, it's everybody at Sheffield City Council, including officers and directors and the chief exec. It's everybody, because it's the code of governance. So yeah, all of us together work on this.
I think that sometimes members forget that they're part of it too. That was why I was suggesting it. And also going back to what you said earlier, Angela, I'm not on my phone here, I'm finding other documents, and it was under Principle E, developing the entity's capacity, including the capability of its leadership and the individuals within it, that one of the bullet points, here we are, ensuring members and staff have access to appropriate induction and training, making sure that everybody has appropriate skills. So that's there in that document that you were looking for, Angela. Yeah. And so
my point was not just having available, is making people do it.
It does say that as good practice people should. Whose remit does it come under, Gillian?
Well, governance is in Terry's cabinet portfolio, but do you want me to have a look at some comms perhaps that could go to both officers and members, just reminding them about it and the principles or something? I can speak to Terry about that and bring something forward.
And can we also talk to Terry in that case about uptake of training by members? Sorry, development for members. I think training always sounds a bit harsh. Development sounds like a better thing. Sorry, Maroof, did you have your hand up? Did I miss it? No. Okay. So is everybody happy with that item that we've just covered? Okay, and we've made some recommendations. So our next item is, where are we here? The work programme. Abby.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just find what I'm looking for. Yeah, so sorry, I can't find it, just bear with me.
Page 50.
So we're looking at the next meeting in November.
Yeah.
We're looking at the statement of accounts.
Yes.
Report of those charged with governance, annual internal audit opinion reports, information management annual report, annual governance statement as well.
And the response from EMT.
Yes, we're adding in the response from EMT.
Is everybody happy with that programme? I'm conscious, Alison and David, do you feel that there's something with your external expertise that you think we're missing anywhere?
I don't see anything. I wanted to talk about the standards process that Gillian has reinstated from the 1st of October, and ask how many cases there are and when the next consideration subcommittee would be.
Right, Gillian, can we ask you that?
You can, but I don't have that information to hand, I'm afraid. It's something that the Democratic Services team have all the administration on this, and they hold that information. I wasn't expecting to.
Fine. You don't have to. You can say, but you will find out.
Yes. Well, I think that there's a report on the, is it on the next one? I've got a report on. No, it's January, isn't it? January when I do the review of standards complaints procedure.
Okay. Is that okay, Alison?
I'm aware that there was a case just as I came into post back in March, which obviously hasn't been acted upon. And I don't know if there are any other cases that have arisen during the pandemic. So I'd just like to know what the position is.
Okay, I've noted David's going to come in afterwards. Gillian, would you like to respond?
Like Gillian, I can't give the full answer, but I do know that I'm sitting on 3.
Ah. Okay.
I'm sure there's more, but I'm sitting on 3.
So we like Alison said, it's been reinstated. So there are a number of outstanding matters from pre-lockdown in March that we're picking up. There is a consideration subcommittee that was outstanding from then that will also need to be rearranged. And I think you've probably been asked for dates for the diary. Or if not, then you will be very soon.
Yeah, we have been asked for dates, Gillian. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Any other comments? Right.
Sorry, just a very quick one from me. Looking much further ahead, the programme quite rightly suggests that there'll be a statement of accounts report in June next year. I suspect the deadline for next year's statement of accounts will move backwards, so we might need to reschedule that. But we won't. Okay. We don't know where it'll be yet, so that will be under review.
Well, we're probably on the same report where the government announces it's going to give squillions to local government as a thank you for all the work it's done on COVID.
We can hope, Chair. We can hope.
Nobody breathes. Okay. So. Oh. Where is it? So then we just have dates of future meetings, which so our next meeting is the 26th of November, and then in January there's an additional meeting in February if required, but we don't know yet. Okay, well, thank you all very much for coming and giving up your early evening. And I'll see you all soon, I hope. This all feels a bit strange, doesn't it? When you sort of, usually at a meeting you file out chatting, and this one we all just sort of disappear. So thank you all very much and see you soon. Okay, everybody wave. Oh.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.